What's going on, everyone? My name's Eric. I'm with OhanaSlack, and I'm doing this video to put a use case together for people who are trying to manage a lot of records in a flow and running into issues with either flow limits or just general governor limits. So Paul McCollum has been instrumental in helping me out with this. I will start by saying that the use case here is very straightforward in my case. Basically, we had an opportunity that has opportunity products, and we connected Salesforce to an ERP system, and we're pulling data out of the ERP system into Salesforce, which are invoice line items, and attaching them to opportunities. So in 2 years worth of data, we have about 1,600 closed won opportunities, and we have about 320,000 invoice line items. So there's a lot of data that we have to work here. And the ability was to be able to do a daily refresh of this without running into any issues. Now, current state, if you take a look at it, this is the current flow that we've had. You can see here, we tried to use pause elements initially, and we were running into a couple of issues because of the pause element. If you've tried to work with a lot of data, once it saves all of your get records and everything that you've done, it would just create a lot of issues. But in essence, the flow here is something that's very simple. It's simply every time an opportunity is updated, get all the post-stat line items that are associated, right? These invoice line items that are associated with your opportunity, and be able to sum up their revenue and assign the values to a field in the opportunity to make that comparison and update the opportunity. Very, very simple. However, when you have about 500 line items in average per opportunity, things can add up very quickly, and you'll start hitting limits very quickly. This auto launch flow works well on its own, but if you start trying to do it on a scheduled basis or multiple opportunities at the same time, you'll almost immediately have issues. I think the most I was able to do was about 10 to 15 records at a time. And even with the pause, you were running into issues. So what we devised, thanks a lot in part to Paul, is simply putting together platform events and using platform events to reset your transaction limits and be able to expand what you can do. Now, here is how everything starts. A simple schedule flow that creates a platform event. And the platform event has several important pieces that you have to keep in mind. The very first piece that we have is a field called counter. So in our case, as I mentioned, we have about 1,600 opportunities to go through. I put a limit up to 2,000. This counter is going to be crucial to avoid any infinite loops. Then you have an event start time, which is an optional. I use this to track the start time that the first platform event runs, so that way I can compare it to the end time of the very last platform event and see how long this has been taking. The last refresh date is going to be crucial to, again, help you pick exactly what you need, and we'll cover that in a second. And finally, the record count, again, a bit of an optional. I just want to count how many records have I gone through in the entire process from start to finish. And I leave that up in a custom notification. So you saw the original flow. You'll find a lot of similarities on this flow. This time around, the very first thing that we do is a counter check. So that way we check how the counter has been going. Every time we run by this platform event that got launched, or this flow for a platform event that got launched, we basically should subtract the counter by 1. Again, this is what prevents you from going into an infinite loop that you do not want on your Salesforce database. The second part is we find the opportunity, and it's a little bit different. Before, you had the opportunity already from the process builder that launched the flow. You already had that ID in there, but right now we're finding an opportunity where the refresh date is not equal to the refresh date that you started. So the case being, we needed a daily refresh to be able to get all that information in there. Now, the daily refresh, what we're going to do is that we're going to pick an opportunity. As we're running it through this platform event flow individually, we will check what's the latest information that came over from the middleware, from the ERP, and we will push the last refresh date up by 1. So that way, when the platform event launches again with the reset governor limits, then you will be able to confirm that you're not going to pick the same opportunity twice. So essentially that's how all of that's coming about. And one of the big things, you have to make sure that you have some default outcome fields, especially here, at every step. So that way, if something happens, again, you're on a cycle and you want to make sure that just because something errors, that you don't stop your cycle. So similar to the original flow, we get all of the line items that are on the database. If there's an error, no records were found, was a common one, we basically connected this fault line back to assigning values in case there was nothing. A simple decision path to say, hey, have you found items? I've had to use both of these in tandem, but ideally if no line items are found, meaning nothing's been invoiced yet on this closed won opportunity, then we want to assign some basic values. I just put zeros across the board and I update the opportunity. If you find the efforts very similar to what the original flow was, I sum up the revenue. I'm using a calculate collection, so that way you can easily do this without having to do a loop. Highly recommend it. But eventually we just assign all of our values and we update the opportunity. And once it's done, both of these are linked by creating the next platform event. That platform event that gets created is going to launch the same exact item that we have here. So on this item though, we will have, again, all of the fields that we had at the very beginning on that schedule flow. The counter will have a formula that subtracts the counter by 1, again, preventing infinite loops. Then we will go through the event start time, the last refresh date, and the record count. Basically passing that information forward. The formula record count we just increased by 1, and just kind of go through how many records we've processed. So this was an extreme success for us. It was finally the cleanest way that we could do it. It does take a little while, so I'm processing about a record a second. So if you're dealing with way more records than we are, then you may run into issues. But just to give you a very rough timeline, we have about, I think we ran it through 1,700 records almost, let's just round up, and it took us about 44 minutes to go through. So I have the custom notification that fires once this is done. So, I'm pacing myself as it right now, and again, it takes about 44 minutes for just under 1,700 records. So use this information as you'd like. Again, if this is being watched by others in your presentation, a big shout out to Paul McCollum for helping me out on this one, and I hope this is useful to you. So